I appreciate the effort to smoothly transition between the Warner Animation Group logo and the pan down to Venice Beach. But once those clouds come to a screeching halt, it just highlights how flat and lifeless the backgrounds are in this movie. This is the most fake-looking 2D background in the history of PNG mountains. I wouldn't be surprised if the animators just bought a stock photo of the Santa Monica Mountains and called it a day. Ah, good old copy-pasted buildings, and trees, and people. And speaking of buildings, this city looks nothing like Los Angeles, California. Apparently the rest of the city that isn't Venice Beach or the boardwalk just doesn't exist. Also, not even Warner Bros. Can escape the edge of the map sin. I guess Warner's 2D artists weren't clever enough to cover the entire horizon with that stock photo. These two shots clearly don't take place on the same map. In the second shot, the ocean is far less choppy, not to mention a completely different color, and there are far fewer people walking about. If this was meant to be a smooth transition from Venice Beach to the ocean front walk, it didn't work. For some reason, the flag on the left is flapping harder than on the right. Does the other flag somehow have a higher wind resistance stat? This guy can apparently be in two places at once. Either that, or the animators just reused the model. While understandably due to the sheer number of people needed to fill the space believably, it's still sinnable. Also, the way his knees bend, by him, I mean the guy walking towards the camera, is super snappy. The color of the sky changes between shots, going from the brightest cyan to a normal, still saturated blue or blue. Also, this girl is in both of these shots in different locations. Ironically, she's in the same area on the screen between shots, so it's even more obvious. Okay, cut. Lighting director, you can't just light a person of color like that. Look at him! Look at the shading! You think that's okay? Also, ugh, what is this blurring for? It gives things that are supposed to be in focus gross, fuzzy outlines. There is no way in heck that girl didn't just get trick flipped in the face. Some of these models are way more polished than others, and it shows. This guy's clothes shudder as he stops. Cloth physics. Difficult for even multi-million-dollar animation teams to get right. Two things. First, the girl is supposed to be dropping a coin into the street performer's hat, but you can clearly see she didn't actually. The Foley artist tried to cover up the error with a money clinking sound effect, but it didn't fool us. Also, the clinking would only happen if the street performer's hat was made of metal itself too, or at least the inside is lined with it, for some reason. This skater's hand stays very awkwardly in the default position, only moving slightly beyond that. I don't know about you, but I doubt any normal person is going to awkwardly keep their hand extended like that. Even assuming these are really cheap plastic cups you get at CC's Pizza or something similar, they are way too bouncy, as if they're made of rubber. Come back here. I'm going to add a sympathy sin removal for Frank Welker, the only member of the original cast to reprise his role in SCOOB. Welker has been in the voice acting business for nearly 60 years, voicing everything from Megatron and Transformers to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Welker is the original voice of Fred Jones and has voiced Scooby since 2002. Also, he's the only actor in this entire film who gives a decent performance, and it's heartbreaking to hear him put effort into such a throwaway film whose primary purpose is to set up a cinematic universe. Bring back my heroes! This basketball comes to a hard stop only a few feet away from where it was dropped. Yet another case of using the same model multiple times.
Oh, hey, watch it!
This is the absolute worst design for a sign I've seen. There's clearly space for the B, but they just had to make an extra chunk of sign on top to put it on. It's so hard to even read this word altogether. For one frame, the motion blur is so strong on this person that their shoe looks more like a skeleton rather than a shoe. This entire group of people in the background is not moving. They managed to offset all these people's animations, have them talking, walking, and gestating, but alas, the Achilles heel of animations, floating feet.
Sorry.
Are these construction workers coming out of the tow ring shop with that pipe?
Dispatch, got a stray dog.
Did the animators forget you can see through the officer's glasses? Cause his eyeballs are literally not animated underneath glasses. Oh, looks like this kid from earlier is back again. I don't know exactly what that is in the reflection of the officer's glasses, but it definitely isn't Scooby. Oh, of course! How could we forget the stuff store? You know, the place where you get stuff.
Dispatch, got a stray dog on a tube of compressed meat. Repeat, I have a grand theft gyro in progress.
There is a time-honored tradition of kids' movies and TV shows adding more adult-oriented jokes to keep parents entertained. Be they the pop culture parodies of Sesame Street, or pretty much everything about Animaniacs. This Grand Theft Euro joke has to be one of the most pathetic attempts at parental comedy I have ever seen. The entire setup of this chase was leading up to the stupid pun. And I should know, I've been making some pretty awful ones the last couple of videos. Writers, I appreciate you don't want to bore any parents dragged against their will to see this movie by their kids, but can you at least try to make them laugh? Also, we're adding an extra 30 sins for that awful pronunciation of gyro. What even is a gyro? SCOOB, the officer, the bike, and the Euro meat all shamelessly clip to each other here. They didn't even try to hide it, and it ruins what could have been a decent joke. While it's a neat touch to have Scooby run his fingers along the officer's back, I didn't notice this until I was watching this in slow motion. In other words, it's a useless detail only meant for people who watch the movie at home frame by frame for meaningless details to complain about on their YouTube channel. Next sin, please. The bike cop's wrist is so broken. The Euro never touches the floor when it hits the ground. On the very right of the screen, you can see the cop's shadow just sitting there frozen, meaning his model is just sitting still in the sky until the character model is ready to hit its mark. And once this lady has hit her mark, she stands there frozen for the rest of the shot, except for a very slight head tilt right at the end. The officer's bike keeps over-reflecting blue, either from the sky or the flashing light on the front. Young Shaggy begins the down on his food-throwing animation immediately after the cop's character model passes by him, and the up, the reaction where he actually throws the food, is delayed by a frame or two so it can line up with the musical sting. The flow of the choreography is just incredibly awkward.
69.
Shaggy, why did you buy a burger and fries when you, A, don't care about your loss, and B, have sub sandwiches in your backpack anyway? Oh, it's because the writers needed a way to have Scooby run into you before he actually meets you. How convenient.
Like, slow down, dude.
While the sign behind it looks crisp and clean, this tie-dye panel? Sheet? Blanket? Well, whatever it is, the pattern on it looks woefully low-res in comparison, especially with how the lowest edge is all jagged, yet the top edge is clean-cut. Shaggy doesn't put earphones into his ears. He's putting wires into his ears. Dude, you need new headphones. Young Shaggy's voice acting is really uninspired. He sounds like a Zoomer who had a vague impression of hippie culture explained to him by his older brother, and maybe understood about half of it. Ah, yes, those phones with their physical home button and 4 extra buttons on the front?
One is the loneliest number. Lonely.
This shot is trying to put a spin on an old comedy trope where someone puts on the radio as a distraction from something upsetting them, but the music on the dial happens to be exactly about that.
50 ways to leave your lover. They say that breaking up is hard to do.
There's 2 problems with the way it's used here, however. Trying to use not Spotify playlists instead of a radio takes away the random element, and does little to sell the idea that the world hates Shaggy. Plus, since switching radio stations has been changed to pressing icons on a phone, the audience is left with the extremely awkward image of Shaggy cycling through multiple app icons for what should be a single music streaming service.
My new podcast, Friends. Who needs them?
These flags are supposed to be moving in the wind as we've seen earlier, but they're perfectly stiff. When the skateboarders go to push forward, there's no anticipation to the movement, so it looks oddly robotic. Even the animations from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater do this better.
Put yourself out there. When the hand of friendship
This is some extra blatant prop recycling. 2 tents using the same psychic greetings texture, one each in the medium shots on Shaggy, and the 2 surfer dudes. Those 2 tents can't be more than 100 feet away from each other. I'm sorry, but a hard stop like that would have sent the officer flying forward, even with the custom mountain bicycles typically given to bike cops. I don't know how, but the sand jerks, jolts, Jumps?
Make friends. Check.
This umbrella is missing the structural canopy underneath, also known as the ribs.
Nice to meet you.
Suddenly, Scooby-Doo is the only character on the beach. This scene is meant to show how lonely Shaggy is by having these two sand dunes act as his playmates. But this transition uses a percussion instrument called a mark tree that is heavily associated with magic, dreams, and illusions. This gives the impression that the faces that appear on the sand dunes are imaginary when, in fact, Shaggy is making up the dunes to look like people. It's technically correct, but very confusing, especially for a younger audience.
Well, I told my mom I was
Wet seaweed would not be sticking up like this. It would be sticking to itself and laying flat.
meeting my pals at the beach.
I know Shaggy isn't supposed to be the most situationally aware person, but one of Scoob's ears is very obviously poking up above the sand pile. Also, of all the texture you gave to Scoob's fur, you made his nose completely smooth. Not only does it make Scooby's nose look like rubber, but it just looks super out of place compared to the high definition fur texture all over Scoob. Even Doug from Up had some texture to his nose.
So, if she asks, this technically counts as a play date.
And then, in that moment, half the contents of Shaggy's sandwich fell out.
But it's all good. I like eating lunch by myself.
This seaweed is way too wiggly and bouncy. The section of seaweed on the right side of Scooby's face very obviously moves more as a section than as individual strands or leaves. The moment Scooby got out of that sand pile, it should have collapsed, especially with it being such dry sand. There's nothing holding it together. Even just slight movements would have caused sand to start falling down. When Scooby moves out of the sand pile, he should still have some of the seaweed stuck on his head. The sand has magical resetting powers. Or perhaps the animators just forgot to simulate particle effects for the shot. There's a strange reflective dot that shows up for a few frames. It looks like a lens flare that wasn't properly rendered. Scooby's back legs are so far off to the side that his body looks broken. There's a strange glitch with the waves in the background. This whole sandwich model looks immaculate, perfect to a fault. It looks like one of those fake plastic food toys you give to a 4-year-old to shut them up. Shaggy and Scooby are about to eat the dirtiest gyro to ever exist. It's been rolled around the floor for like an entire minute now. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if the movie ended early with both of their untimely deaths. Rest in peace, guys. The sandwich clips through Scooby's tongue when they start eating here.
Hey, Scooby!
Middle name.
Again, whatever it is that's reflecting in the officer's glasses, it's not Shaggy and Scooby.
I know we just met, and I didn't want to seem too desperate.
One thing that's a testament to modern animation, fondant clothing. It's too smooth, and the fondant is gross anyway. Give me the wrinkles!
I love it.
Shaggy latches on the collar at the back, and then it's at the side of the tag. This is something that happens more than once in this animation. Using the power of shapeshifting, this bag of candy changes size from scene to scene.
Just as we thought.
It's the curator, Mr. Wickles.
Oh my god, I'm not mad at her. I'm worried about her. I think somebody nominated her as a joke or something. I mean, nobody votes for her. She's gonna have a total meltdown. And who's gonna have to take care of her? Me.